So remember, my friends, you are not meant to agree with these. So when I do say something that gets you mad, drop me a comment below. But I'm Simon Miller. Thank you very much for stopping by. I love professional wrestling, and sometimes, even though it seemed dumb on paper, I actually think WWE got these decisions right. So we start with the one that people are still talking about 10 years on, which means I'm getting old and I'll be dead soon, but WrestleMania 30, The Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar won that match, and he was the guy to defeat the streak or break the streak. Even Steve Austin was in the production truck going, "Oh, hell, son, that's a terrible idea." But in hindsight, I do think WWE made the right call. Now, we're just talking about the wrestling here, but honestly, I remember at this time, and maybe I was alone, maybe I was on a ship all by myself, I kind of felt like they didn't fumble Brock Lesnar's return. But because Brock Lesnar had left the WWE in 2004, whenever the flub it was, and then he had returned after doing all the stuff with the UFC, as always, when you do walk back into Titan Towers, you have to get punished a little bit. So he did have the good feud with Cena, and he did have the good feud with Triple H, but Brock Lesnar didn't feel like a smashing machine. He didn't feel like the end-of-level boss he would go on to become. And the two things that I am convinced put him in that position, to the point he was still doing it in 2024, by the way, or 2023, whatever the flub you want to say, is that he beat the streak and nobody could believe it. And he then had that incredible stuff with John Cena at SummerSlam, which, by the way, was meant for Daniel Bryan, but we're going to talk about that later too. Now, listen, I'm not saying somebody like Roman Reigns wouldn't have benefited more. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying Brock Lesnar most definitely benefited from defeating The Undertaker, because, again, he became the dude on top of everybody in WWE for 10 years. Like, this was still going on in 2023. Anytime Brock walked out, everyone would be like, "Oh my gosh, it's Brock Lesnar, he's really legitimate, man, and he's going to kick your ass for real." And I'm sure there would have been other ways to get there. But we actually did something that WWE rarely did during some crazy years, is that we just pulled the trigger and we went all in on him. And that is why I actually think it was a good decision, especially now, right? Everyone's gone. Undertaker gone, Brock Lesnar gone. I mean, that's a controversial thing, but again, we're talking about controversial decisions. But I don't mind it at all. And I think that if a young up-and-coming star was never going to beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania, because WWE was worried, well, what if they don't get over in the long run? Then taking somebody that you already knew had the moxie and just turning them into this absolute beast, so I don't mind it at all. And again, you can say on the flip side, if Undertaker had never been beaten, I probably wouldn't have minded that either. But when I look back now, do I think that's a mistake? No, I don't. Which also actually ties in, because we continue on with Brock Lesnar. Do you remember when SmackDown debuted in Fox all the way back in 2019? Kofi Kingston was the world champion, one of the best things that WWE has ever done, because I love that guy. And we were doing Brock Lesnar versus Kofi Kingston, because having a title match on a debut version of the show made all the sense. And Brock Lesnar beat him in, I do believe, 8.2 seconds. And this was dumb, this was stupid, and it still gets me angry. But you know why I think it's the right decision? Because WWE was always going to do this, right? I am playing my hand given the cards that I knew were going to be dealt to me. And look, we go back to Brock Lesnar versus John Cena at SummerSlam, right? That role wasn't meant for John Cena. Daniel Bryan was put into that spot. And the only reason he never made it to Hot WrestleMania in August is he got injured after WrestleMania 30 when he became the WWE champion. But the idea was still on the table, so WWE decided, well, we'll do it with John Cena, and once again, we'll light a fire under Brock's ass. So do you know what the equivalent was for Kofi Kingston? Brock Lesnar would have beaten him and beaten him and beaten him, and we would have seen Kofi Kingston just get destroyed for 15 minutes. That is worse to me than 8 seconds. What was he going to do? Get one out of nowhere SOS, right? Or one out of nowhere trouble in paradise. And Brock Lesnar probably would have kicked out one. And I'm just crying. Go, why? Why don't we book Kofi Kingston properly? This man is a damn saint. So it's like pulling the Band-Aid off. Do you want to take it off slowly and be like, or do you just want to rip it off? I just want to rip it off. So, knowing Vince McMahon and knowing WWE and knowing how they treated people like this, because again, throughout his whole run, he was never treated as the guy. It was totally redonkulous. This is not a bad decision. I would much rather this than anything else we would have had to have gone through. And now you can say, but surely, Simon, the best way to have dealt with this would to have been to push Kofi Kingston properly. Yes, but we weren't doing that by October 2019. So just take the horse round the back and shoot it right in the head. I shouldn't have said that part. I will keep the theme going as well as we move to WrestleMania 28, and Daniel Bryan is here. And really, as a lot of these are, hindsight is a powerful thing, because I remember watching WrestleMania 28, and it was Sheamus taking on Mr. Bryan, and he goes and he kisses AJ Lee. When he turns around, he gets bro kicked right in the head, and he then gets beaten. I was up. I remember I watched this live at some pub or some bar or something like that, which I rarely do with WrestleMania, and I was up getting getting drinks for people. I was like, what happened? I totally missed it, even though it was on screens all over the place. But I thought they were going to lock up. I thought they were going to punch each other for a little bit. I thought it had at least 120 seconds, but actually I had 18. But what this did was, the idea was it was going to turn Sheamus into a super duper mega star, and he still got there due to other means, I suppose. But it didn't actually have the intended effect, because everyone went, no, we like Daniel Bryan. We loved him as the champion. We like all his stupid antics. So now we're going to get behind him even more. And if you want to say this is the day that the Yes Movement was born, I totally think there's an argument for that. And it does end with him having that incredible moment at WrestleMania 30. And I know there are lots of things to this here. Punk needs to leave and, Batista needs to get booed, etc., etc. But I think this is part of it. So if WWE had never done, maybe you don't get the vitriol where within a year, 18 months, everyone was like, we're going to take over the show because you didn't push the yes man. So now I think it's brilliant. And the only real shame I have with it is that it did kind of affect Sheamus a little bit, because I think he had an unnecessary and unfair stink on him for ages. And now finally we've got to 2024 and everybody realizes that Sheamus is bloody brilliant, because Sheamus is bloody brilliant. So if I had to go through this nonsense in order to get where I was, or specifically to get WrestleMania 30, now I look back and I'm totally cool with it, especially because when you do go watch that match, I understand why this happened, but there is kind of a false narrative there. Of course the fans go crazy on the evening, because everybody likes seeing a title change and everybody likes being surprised. But then about 5 minutes later, you do see some individuals just looking off into the distance, because I think they realized, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. And we'll stick with a recent one in case you're hearing some of these going, when you're talking about such old wrestling, which is not true, just makes me feel like an old man, which is Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 39. Now, you can hear me talking about this at the time, which would have been April 2023. I said it on these videos, and I said it on What Culture videos. As long as Cody won at WrestleMania 40, and it was the long-term plan to do this, I was going to be totally fine with it. Now, if he hadn't won, I would have said this was the worst decision ever. Here we are in August 2024. Cody did win at WrestleMania 40. He essentially had 1 year where he was the WWE champion in terms of his work rate and the kind of stuff he was doing and the main events he was in without the championship belt. And then you got to the 4-0, and he won the title, and maybe because we had the disappointment of WrestleMania 39, it actually did mean more. Now, rumors have come out since that maybe this was a Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns idea. If it was, I say thumbs up, you called it right. Now, look, it got out of control, too. We were doing ups and downs live outside of, was it SoFi Stadium, WrestleMania 38? Probably. And we almost had a riot on day 2 because people were drunk and so mad that Cody Rhodes hadn't won, the police almost got called. That's a different story for a different day, but it was also kind of funny and kind of terrifying at the same time. But it all worked out in the end, right? And look, it still would have been amazing if he had won at WrestleMania 39. But the reason I think I like it now is that it went to show me WWE is going back to long-term planning as we arrive in the Triple H era. And if we are patient and we put our trust in what they are going to do, the actual payoff will be even bigger and even better than maybe we would have possibly imagined. So now it's awesome because we know that Cody Rhodes finishes his stories at WrestleMania 40. So now you can watch all of this. You can watch those 3 WrestleManias, and it's like the most awesome narrative if you're a Cody Rhodes nerd like I am. He comes back at WrestleMania 38, one of my favorite returns ever. I still can't believe it. You get to WrestleMania 39, and that's when he falls into his troubles. And then WrestleMania 40, he finishes it. That's the conclusion. These are the arcs that movies take, right? You start off all happy lol. You get to the middle of something bad happens where the hero has to overcome an obstacle, and he finally does that, and he achieves. I'm going to be really annoying and applaud this. I don't even think it's controversial. I think it's the right thing to do. No one is going to agree with me now, but again, this is me sat here in 2024 and using my brain, which I understand is underpowered, and trying to figure out how I do feel. Jinder Mahal winning the World Championship out of nowhere. I actually think, all things considered, WWE made the right choice. Now, not necessarily about making Jinder Mahal champion. I'm always like, why the flub not? Jinder seems like such a nice guy. I'm just glad he got his moment. But what's the alternative? Let's say we cannot change Jinder Mahal winning that championship, right? We do not have that power. We do not have that magic. Okay, so how would you like to do this? Obviously, the wrestling way and the proper way, in inverted commas, to do it is to build Jinder, and he starts getting some wins, and he starts cutting some promos. Do you know what that would have done? Especially at the time, given the state of the wrestling community, everybody would have been mad, and everybody would have been pissed off. And and all the negativity and the shouting would have got louder and louder, and then he would have won, and people would have gone, man, I told you so, I told you so. This goes back to the ripping the Band-Aid off. If WWE decided to make Jinder Mahal the champion, just do it. Just get it over and done with. The rumor always was is that they were trying to develop and move into the Indian markets, so they thought having a representative champion would help with that. I never think that's the right way to go about anything. I think you should just put on a good product, have stars all over the place, and hopefully people will gravitate towards what you are showing off. But I actually think it would have caused more issues if we had telegraphed it, because people would have realised, right, all of a sudden Jinder would have been being pushed, like we've already talked about, and being in more high-profile matches. So given that we had made the decision to do this, I actually think just going, man, screw it, do it tonight, and he can beat Randy Orton, which, let's not forget, is also the way he lost the title. He turned up to TV one day and said, oh yeah, now you're losing to AJ Styles. So his whole run was totally batshit anyway. Arrives one day, you're beating Randy, arrives 4 months later, whatever it was, and you're losing to AJ. So I don't mind it at all. I don't think, especially as well, because the reason we were giving it to Jinder wasn't organic. It was a very business-specific reason, which again is totally fine. It's your company. You can do whatever you want. But if we had done the long build and then all of a sudden just changed our minds towards the end of the year, then everyone would have gone, well, what a waste of time that was. So at least here, we cut out all of those months, and it wasn't that big of a waste of time. And once more, I totally understand the argument. Well, Simon, if we had put in more equity into this, it probably would have been better when he had the championship. I totally agree. But that is not the WWE we had at the time. That's why people are loving things so much right now. This was the WWE that everyone is talking about because they feel safe to do so, where you would arrive at work at, I don't know, 6 p.m. and Raw would be at 8 p.m. and it would change 122 times. You can't do anything with that, and it's just going to create a stressful environment. Also, this made me laugh, and it was funny. And again, I like Jinder, so I'm good with it. Let us go right back in time now to 1993 and talk about someone that didn't get the championship, even though they had the equivalent of what I guess you would call in the modern day the Roman Reigns push. Because I'm sure you remember the Lex Express when Lex Luger, here's the coolest thing about Lex Luger, right? He did drive around the United States on a bus going, man, I love America. He did slam Yokozuna on a boat. We can't get away from these things. But the one thing that people never talk about is that just before all of this, he was the narcissist. He'd flex in the mirror and be like, oh man, I'm so sexy. There was no change to this. There was no effort to explain why his character had all of a sudden shifted. One day he just went, man, America. What do you mean, Lex? Just America. What about the peaks of your biceps? I told you, I just said America. So this was being pushed down people's throats. Now, yeah, sure. There were many occasions on pay-per-view at WrestleManias, the SummerSlams, etc., where we probably should have coronated Lex. It was the other way around, really. Vince McMahon, I think, decided, oh, we should do it at WrestleMania. So at SummerSlams and Survivor Series, we pushed the pause button. But that actually gave wrestling fans, especially back in the early 90s, time to look at the roster and pick their new guy after Hulk Hogan. And again, it's all out there. You can read about this over and over again. They did not pick Lex Luger. They picked Bret Hart, which is actually one of the few times, if you're comparing it once again to the modern day, where management listened and they said, okay, we've invested all this money in Lex Luger, but we don't think it's going to work. Now, he probably shouldn't have had that draw with Yokozuna. We probably should have just let him hit the torture rack or whatever he would have done and get the victory to see if it would have clicked. Maybe all of a sudden when you do have the title, sometimes, you know, you do find magic in the bottle. But we waited and we waited and we waited. And I think the reason we waited is because deep down in our tum-tums, people realized that it wasn't clicking with Lex as people were expecting. And again, so much had been invested into this. He had a bus that he drove around the United States of America. He was meant to be Mr. America. He was meant to be a hero, and everyone went, nah, you see that really good technical wrestler who's kind of a badass? We want to pick him instead. So I actually think giving him the title wouldn't have worked anyway. You would have just prolonged the inevitable. So actually, I respect it. You know, all this investment once again, and we just decided, nah, man, we're going to head in a different direction. And it didn't really make a difference either way. Because WWF in 1993, 4, 5, and 6 was an interesting product. They were clearly, you know, suffering from the departed of Hulk Hogan. And they didn't really pick up again until the Attitude Era when they had Steve Austin and The Rock. But maybe I'm saying this as a massive Bret Hart guy, although I actually think Lex Luger is vastly underrated as well. People like to pretend that, oh, Lex Luger is rubbish. You haven't watched WCW. Go and watch WCW from the same time. Lex Luger was so over. People love this guy, so there would have been nothing wrong with it. But I still think we made the right call. And now we jump forward to 2022 and we go to Clash at the Castle, because do not forget, we're in Drew McIntyre's fake hometown of Wales, and everybody said, you know what, Drew McIntyre should be the guy to beat Roman Reigns. Well, as I sit here today, I actually think what we did was better. Because of course it all ties into Cody Rhodes being the guy at WrestleMania 40, but now we have another subplot. Without all of this, without the screw job, we do not get two specific things that right now I am enjoying on TV. The first is Solo Sikoa. I know he is a back and forth figure. People like to talk about him, but he is in a main event program essentially with Roman Reigns right now, and I don't think he has that rise if he doesn't have one hell of a badass debut, right? He turns up in his hoodie, his favorite piece of clothing, and he pulls the referee out the ring, right? Or was it Drew? I can't remember. But Drew McIntyre was about to win. Solo Sikoa screws him over, and he joins the Bloodline. Now, I was there live for this. I loved the swerve. I didn't see it coming, but also it made sense, and they are few and far between. But also, 2 years on, Drew McIntyre is better than he ever has been. He's so good on the microphone, people are going, man, he outdid CM Punk, which is quite the thing to say. And yeah, he's embroiled in a feud that will be up for Feud of the Year at the end of 2024. And if he wins that championship here, he doesn't have the beef that he is using now to be the super duper mega heel, because the reason Drew is so good is because even though he comes across like a massive dickhead, you listen to him and you go, dude, he is telling the truth. You realize this, right? Every single thing he's saying is correct. He has been screwed over a lot, and to have a point about being screwed over, do you know what needs to happen? This is basic maths. You have to be screwed over. So if he does win the championship there, he probably only holds it for what, 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4. Then I'm sure it would have gone back to Roman. Maybe it would have been a 24-hour thing. WWE has done that before. So you do it for the moment in the United Kingdom. But whether they meant to or not, by happenstance, this one moment where people were genuinely mad because they were behind Drew, which is awesome, it has made McIntyre a proper main eventer. And I think he will get that championship again. And during that run, he should be a dominant, super duper asshole, which will make it even better still. And then you have the stuff with Solo that we've already talked about. Plus, it made people more mad at Roman, which obviously helped when we got to WrestleMania 40. So once again, when we put our hindsight goggles on, actually kind of a genius decision whether they meant it or not. And we get to a stupid one after this, and it's those early Saudi Arabia shows. Now, I don't care what you say, they were glorified house shows for a long old while. And then even now, I mean, there's controversy around them, blah, blah, but once again, it's a controversial video. But do you remember when we were having the Best in the World tournament? And it ended with Shane McMahon, for no reason, just turning up and winning. It's one of the dumbest things that has ever happened, because in terms of story, you wouldn't be able to explain it to anyone that didn't watch wrestling, which means there's a fundamental flaw. But nothing has ever entertained me as much, in the sense it was an event where, given the time differences, I was able to sit up at a reasonable hour and live tweet this and be on social media. And when Here Comes the Money hit, the meltdown, they still make me laugh today. I remember being in tears because people were so mad. And that's when I realized it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. It's absolutely brilliant in terms of sports entertainment terms. I had tears streaming down my face. So this is a very specific one to me. But if I watch television and I watch wrestling to be distracted and to be entertained, this is one of the best things that WWE has ever done, even if it was for all the wrong reasons. But also, who cares who wins the Best in the World tournament? This is like the greatest Royal Rumble or whatever stupid stuff we've done. Shane McMahon, The Miz, Dolph Ziggler, pull it out your rectum. It would have made no difference. WWE would have totally forgotten about this. They just came up with stupid stipulations in order to try and sell a show as a pay-per-view premium live event, even though it wasn't. I mean, this is, I can't remember who's in charge of them now, but one of them asked for the Ultimate Warrior or something, or Yokozuna. It's like, we have a massive problem there. It's definitely not going to happen. So given that they were kind of nothing, really, I would much rather have nonsense like that than serious stuff that these days nobody would care about. Now I get to go back and watch this, sometimes find those old tweets, and I think it's hilarious, so I'm a fan of it. And I'm a huge fan of NXT 2.0. I remember when WWE decided they were going to change it from black and gold, or whatever you want to call it, to the more colourful scheme, and quite rightfully, everybody was a little bit perturbed by this. Now, I don't actually think NXT 2.0 was very well done. Let's just use the most basic words possible, because we basically said we are going to do a 180 compared to anything that we had before. Now, you should never do that because you screw over your current fan base. And everyone always says, oh, you've got your current fans anyway, you should focus on everybody else. No, you should focus on everybody full stop, especially those that are giving you their time and money constantly. In fact, they should be the most important ones. But when you actually delve into it, there is also a power struggle behind the scenes between Vince McMahon and Triple H. And what was happening here is that Triple H was away with his health issues. So Vince was like, well, I'm going to repaint NXT in my image because, again, a bunch of nonsense was going on. You can read about it. It's all all out there. So while NXT 2.0 was, I don't want to say it was a bit lame, I think it was a bit directionless. And again, it was such a slap in the face. We went from dark to colourful when there was no need. What it did do is it gave birth to the NXT we have today, which I actually think is the perfect balance between everything we've had before. You get your badass matches, you get your badass characters that you know are going to be massive on the main roster one day, but you also have this wonderful developmental spirit where you get to see superstars learning their craft, but you also get utter nonsense and you get such over-the-top characters we could even be back in the mid-90s. I mean, I always go back to Chase U. I don't think Chase U ever exists without NXT 2.0, but it is so wonderful that we have a bunch of people wrestling just because they could go to school together. It's Saved by the Bell. You also have the D'Angelo family that kill people because they're in the mafia, and those strands started in NXT 2.0 when Shawn Michaels and the rest of the crew came in, and they just smoothed all of this out. Now listen, I love the black and gold era, but I do think it had reached its peak. I do think it needed a bit of a shuffle, and given that while it is definitely a proper third brand that has its own TV deal, I'm sure it's making WWE loads of money, it is still meant to be a funnel from taking people from the Performance Center onto Raw or SmackDown, and this is the best that it's ever been. And I still want all the independent stars to come in, like there's rumors that Ricky Starks may go through NXT. I've got no problem with that because, again, I think NXT is a wonderful show, and I think it does prepare people for what WWE want them to do on Mondays or Fridays. But when it was 2.0, loads of people rolled their eyes like, oh man, this is so pathetic. Actually, I think it worked out really well. Now, if we had stuck with the current image back then, no. But given what it did turn into, I'm giving it a couple of massive thumbs up. I kind of love it. Now, the last one is a little bit weird, and again, it's all out there in the ether. We're never going to know for sure, but we go to WrestleMania 18. Now, after the fact, the big criticism was, why did we have Triple H and Chris Jericho main event the thing for the WWE title, when before this we had Hulk Hogan and The Rock? I'm going to tell you why. Now, really, it's because the WWE had no idea that this crowd was going to react so big to Hulk Hogan. I didn't think it at the time. It was exciting because Hulk Hogan back in the WWE, etc. And obviously fighting The Rock, this was a dream match. But I don't think anybody thought we were going to be transported back to 1986 in Madison Square Garden. And I actually think if WWE had realized this and they said, listen, you're going on the main event, we're going to build the entire show with you, you're going to get all the bells, all the whistles, all the pageantry, we would have overblown it so much that you wouldn't have got the here come the awful words, somebody please hit me in the head, visceral and organic reaction that we did get, because I think we would have set everybody else up for it. One of the coolest things about it is when they were staring at each other and you have these Canadian fans losing their mind, and everybody else that would have been in the crowd too. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I didn't see this coming. And we could have watched them stare at each other for the rest of our lives, and everybody would have had a great time. But if we had gone in there going, oh, we're getting the original Hulk Hogan, and The Rock's going to go heel, no way, man. It wouldn't have had the same effect. There was almost an accident by not realizing how big this was going to be, even if some fans realized it. And also, I suppose you could argue it kept the gravitas with the WWE World Championship, even though they'll be the first to admit it. That Jericho Triple H match was not the best, mostly because nothing in the world could have followed this, because that audience had totally worn themselves out. But this is a moment in time, and some people quote this as their favorite match ever, which I totally understand. But if you put it in the main event, and again, moving into that WrestleMania, you're blowing the trumpets and the trombones and shouting from the rafters, oh man, you're going to love it, I think people's expectations would have been too high, whereas being in the sub-main event, whatever the hell you want to call, we kind of went low to high, as opposed to high, and then we fall back into the medium. So, listen, it's kind of a silly decision when we look at it now, but at the time, I think it gave us this magic in the bottle that we wouldn't have got otherwise. And the same with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker when they had their back-to-back WrestleManias. Now, obviously, the one when Shawn Michaels did retire, we put him in the main event because I think we have to do that. But it's why it was much better placed in match 7 or whatever the flub it was at the WrestleMania prior, because it was like a big slap in the face where you kind of caught off guard and you're like, that was amazing. So even if I could go back in time now, would I change this one? No, I would not. And Hogan versus Rock would not go on last. Stupid bald. Now, once again, you're going to have loads of opinions about this, so please do drop me a comment below. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. And bam, there's a video on the screen. I don't care if you watch it, just click it and then go have a sandwich. Also, please do check out grillermind.com/Simon. Use code Simon to get 10% off. Make sure you go to GoGo Fitness and use code Simon20. Patreon.com/Simon316. Simon316 on all social medias. Simon J. Miller on TikTok. Simon on Cameo. Get your personalized video message at ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller. Please buy a t-shirt today. Otherwise, thank you for stopping by, friends, and I will see you soon.